Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I get to work on an oldie but a goodie, and this kind of comes in as a request. It's a partial answer to the request. The request was for a Mitchell 496. Well, I don't have the Mitchell 496 in the shop, but I do have a 488, and the difference is going to be up top in the bail and in the rotor structure. The case essentially is the same. So we'll do as much as we can to help the fellow out before he does anything different with the top side. And if his reel's working well enough, probably can leave most of that alone. The reel is very dirty, but it does crank, and the bail does fire. So I know one of our channel viewers, Chris, loves these reels, and I can't fault them for that. They're very good reels, and we'll show you how to take this reel apart, how to service it, and well, how to keep it fishing for a long time to come. We're going to take the spool off first, and when I do this stuff, I like to kind of clean them as I take them off. And while I take the exterior parts off, I like to encourage you to subscribe to the channel, particularly if you like to learn about fishing reels, if you like to repair fishing reels, if you like to keep yours serviced. That's kind of what this is all about. It's a transference of information, trying to teach you how to do it yourself, and well, kind of pass along what I know so that, well, you can know it, and well, appreciate how all these reels have emerged over time, and well, how some of them have got the reputations that they've so well deserved. This one has a lot of grease on the inner dry components. You don't need that in there, but somebody slobbered it up, so we'll try to do our best to clean that up. All right, we've taken off the spool. We did that by removing this star adjuster here, and well, we'll just keep taking the pieces and parts off. From a mechanical situation, this is much less complicated a reel than, say, the 302, which has that planetary drive system. This is more of how reels evolved, and I think the major difference is this reel was released in 1969, and well, some of those other reels they came much earlier, and well, the engineering was quite incredible. All right, there's 4 side plate screws here. This is an older reel. I would recommend, well, even if you don't need it, put some penetrating oil on through those screws. Let that sink in as you're doing this. I get a lot of calls, a lot of requests on Mitchell fishing reels where the screws have snapped off. And well, mostly on the 300s. And on those 300s, not only have they snapped off, but those slots in those screws have butterflied. That means you can't grab it with a screwdriver because they've just become elongated and misshapen. And well, one of the ways to avoid it is the penetrating oil. The second way to avoid it is to match your screwdriver to the slot in the screw. I know that might sound elementary, but a lot of times folks will go with a smaller blade in the wide slot, and this screw gets stuck or is hard to move, and well, they start elongating it and widening the edges, and that's never a good thing. All right, the 4 screws are out. We'll get our first look inside the case here, if we can get it off. So this was a request. There's been somebody who's had an older Mitchell 396 for a while now, and said, you know, do I have a video? Well, I don't have a video on that one, unfortunately. Boy, this one's just being uncooperative here. Usually you can pry it out, and I'm trying to save the paint here. I don't want to beat something up too much. You can usually work the seam here using a razor knife as a wedge. Just not having a lot of luck with that. Well, I'm going to set this down aside. You don't need to see my struggles. We will get this case off in just a second. Of course, it took nothing once I shut the thing off, and I guess this is why it was stubborn. We have a lot of old grease on the side plate. There was on the crosswind block, and I guess that was acting as a glue. Well, again, just take your time with this. Come ready to do cleaning whenever you're going to do a fishing reel, because most likely there's going to be a lot of old grease and dirt and debris inside it, particularly if you're working on one of these, well, let's just call it a classic or a vintage reel. And, well, it's part of the process, particularly if you've picked a reel like this up at a flea market, or maybe it's your reel and you've just had it sitting around for quite some time. I just had somebody contact me earlier this week, said they haven't been fishing in 20 years. They have a reel that was missing a handle on it. It was put on the shelf 20 years ago, and well, my videos reminded them of that. They found a handle and they got under it and they started doing the servicing of the reel and giving it a second chance, and I applaud that. That's fantastic. This is a good place to tell you to take pictures. If you're working on a reel, particularly an old one, take the pictures as you progress in the removal of the pieces and parts. This is a good place for a picture before you've done anything internally. Those pictures become invaluable during the reassembly if you get lost along the way. So we're going to remove this clip here. That's a 2-prong clip. Let's wipe that off the best that we can. Clear that channel. A little bit of penetrating oil as a degreaser. And when I take my pieces and parts off, I put them into a parts tray. It's just a convenient place for me to manage my pieces and parts as I do the disassembly. It's particularly valuable when it comes time to reassemble. We're going to pull the axle shaft out now. We can hold that crosswind block, but the pins that are holding the axle shaft in, well, they're done, right? They're out, so we can remove this. And same thing here. I'm going to use a light steel wool just to kind of brush down this old grease. I felt it on there as I was pulling it through the pinion gear. So just kind of polish that up. And again, I mentioned earlier when we were starting to clean that spool, somebody kind of globbed a lot of grease onto this, so we can just do the same thing here. I'm going to use a cotton swab to clean out those little nooks there. My cleaning generally is cotton swabs. It's, as you saw, there's a soft scrub, kind of kitchen scrubby there. I do use a variety of little picks and the like, just to kind of clean them up and out. And then, if it's not terrible, I will try to get a bristle brush like this. And whenever I use a bristle brush, I'm going to put it over a paper towel and just pull through, and you can see it pulls through the dirt and debris, and that does a pretty good job of cleaning that up. Alright, my axle shaft is clean. That'll go into the parts tray. And next up then, I've got the crosswind block, which just fell off. And again, that's probably why the side plate was so hard to get off. Who would have thought that underneath that is a clear piece, not a dark piece, which was, of course, miscolored by all the old greases and the like. This is a symmetrical block, so it doesn't matter which side's up, which side's down on this one, but you do need to pay attention as you're doing service on reels. Sometimes they're not symmetrical. You need to know what the upside is and what the downside of that is. Otherwise, generally what happens is the axle bumps to the bottom, or this one freezes up top. Alright, that'll run in my parts tray. And you can see we have a pretty straightforward one here, but don't rush into just pulling pieces and parts off, because what we're going to find is there's a needle bearing in this reel, and you don't want to be particularly disruptive about it. This is a good time to remove the handle. The handle is a screw-in handle. It moves by turning it in the opposite direction of the way that the reel will crank. So if you have a right-handed crank, it's going to turn counterclockwise. Left-handed crank clockwise. This is called the coffee grinder handle. For those of us of a certain age, we actually remember coffee grinders. And yes, it did have a handle like that on it. And we've freed up our main gear now. So in order to get that main gear out, we need to remove the pinion gear, and that requires us to go up top. This is a deep bowl. You can't get a wrench in this way, so you need a socket. And I keep my sockets nearby because, well, I tend to use them a lot. The socket comes off in a traditional counterclockwise or lefty-loosey manner. And when you do a reel service, you want to take all the pieces and parts off, inspect them, make sure that they're clean and that they're not damaged or any way have problems with them. If you do notice problems, you do need to replace them. And I get a lot of questions on this, but it's hard to find parts for Mitchell reels, particularly something like this. The 300s, or you generally can find the pieces and parts for that. But the kind of the ones that were lesser made or made in less quantities, those become harder and harder with each reel that breaks and doesn't get a second chance, right? All right. Clean that out. This one has the brevet in it, B-R-E-V-E-T-E, France, and that's another form of the reel. I know I have to step aside to Chris here for the histories of that, but he's got quite a few of those. I think that might be the Town, I'm not quite sure. All right, I'm using a rod and reel cleaner here. This is Penn Rod and Reel Cleaner, and it does a great job of getting the film from all those years of use off. This one's got a unique bail trip to it. And again, for the most part, this reel is going to mimic the 496 series. The 496 is going to have a higher bail lift. You're going to see a spring in here, a dead end on this side. This is a block, and this is the weakness of this reel. This block is going to come, you can see when you set the reel, there's a stud that actually goes into the hole here when you lift. This block gets pulled in by the little angle piece right here on that body. It's going to pull it in like this, and it's going to fire. That was a mouse trap that just got me there, if you will. So this block breaks, that's the weakness of it. You can see this big spring here. So when you go to set the bail, watch that spring, pull it in. See how I pulled it in? And then again, it's going to hit this ramp here. That's going to pull this block in, this triangular piece. I got my fingers out of the way that time. And that's how that bail assembly works. You do not need to remove the bail wire or the springs for a basic service if your bail wire is working. Take pieces here and put those into the cup just to get them out of the way. And we're going to continue now to service the reel. I'm going to leave that off to the side. Do a little bit of cleanup. We have 3 screws here. What's important to note is that if you take your reel arm on the body and you look, you're at about 11 o'clock with that trip lever. You want to make sure that when you reinstall that you're at 11 o'clock and not putting it into a different position. Again, I've got some tight screws here. I'm sure it's been quite some time since this reel has been serviced. Don't be afraid to use the penetrating oil and make sure you match the screws, the slot in the screw, with that screwdriver. All right, we got them all broken. And this has got a cap here. Well, while I'm doing this is a good time to tell you if you have any questions. If you want to leave those questions in the comment section, I do try to answer those questions and help guide you along the way in terms of, well, maybe you're working on a particular reel and something isn't working the way you thought it would be. Maybe you need some help with diagnosing a particular problem. Maybe you just want to learn more about the reel. So this is 69. This is the height of Mitchell. Mitchell would go on to last another decade or so before it entered into bankruptcy and got sold off in a couple of different varieties. And now it's a name brand of pure fishing, but it has nothing really in terms of similarities between the manufacturer and the lake. In other words, the Mitchell 300 that you can buy today, I think it's the 300X maybe, totally different design. And you would expect that. The 300 was introduced all the way back in the 40s. And, well, technology's come a long way and reels have changed. So you wouldn't expect that to be the same. That cap off, here we go. Let's see if we can pull this out. Look at that. Hey, Chris. Came right out. There you go. I know Chris is watching this one because he likes these reels. All right, this bearing I've been testing. It's probably as good as the day it came in. I remove the bearing. This does have some grease in it. Now, normally I don't grease bearings. This is an open bearing, and I am going to put a little bit of fishing grease in there to repack it. It's sort of like a wheel bearing on a car. Those get repacked in grease. This one I'm going to do just that. Repack it on both sides. And we'll just take our chances here. Normally I would oil the bearing, but we'll go with what's made this reel successful for as long as it's been there. All right. One more thing I want to do on that service is to clean up the pinion gear. You've seen me before use these hard brushes, and I'm going to do just that. Again, pulling through to get rid of the old greases and oils. I like to keep my tools close by on the bench. That way, if I need something, I don't have to lay my project down and try and go find pieces and parts. Now there are tools that, of course, become specialty tools or something, and you don't realize you need them at the time. And yeah, I do have to stop and go do that. But the more I can keep close by, it seems to be a better way for me to do that. Now understand, if you've got one reel you're working on and it's an annual service, don't go pull every tool in your workshop out. Just kind of go at your own pace, your own speed, and how that works. This is the one part of the reel where if you're going to get nervous, get nervous. This has got a roller bearing on the collar of the main gear, and if you don't pay attention, those rollers can come out, and you can spend some time looking around your shop for them. Just taking a little bit of the grease there. The anti-reverse is on. I want to make sure I flip that to the off position. That way, on the way back in, it doesn't interfere with the gear. And now I'm just going to simply pull it over this way. And I may be, there we go. I knew it was there. Now, I tend to shy away much from this particular step. Just being honest, we all have our little things, if you will. I am going to mop up the back of this, and I'm going to leave that roller bearing with the needles in it all into itself right there on the shaft. Now, of course, if you're having an issue with it, you're going to need to remove it, replace it, repair it, re-grease it, whatever the situation is. This one is running fine. This one is going to go undisturbed. I'm going to try and not move this gear around too much as I clean it up. I am going to oil that needle bearing. And I'm just going to sit that right here until I clean the case. Take a picture here, just in case. Here's an unusual setup as far as the Mitchell reels go for the anti-reverse dog spring. It goes on an S shape over these two posts and comes down and rests on the back neck of that anti-reverse. Pay attention to that. I'm going to hold that. I'm going to remove the dog. I'm going to remove that spring. That way it doesn't shoot. And well, if you need confidence builders, always fun to tell you, see, I did it. All right. Cleaning that up. Those two pieces I'm going to lay right there. I'm not putting those into my parts tray. And now it's time for a good old-fashioned cleanup. in aisle 7, if you will. Penetrating oil. Start with rags. I like to start with the least abrasive method possible and get as much of it out as I can. And then if there's things that you need to do, stuff is too stubborn or the like, or a rag can't reach in there, then go for the next step. It's an iterative process. This reel was found at a flea market, and it was found in this condition. So I often wonder, how do you wind up with a reel at a flea market? And I guess at some point in time somebody was fishing it, loved it. Can you imagine the day somebody brought it home, all excited, and then they fished it and did whatever they did with it. Maybe they passed on or gave up fishing or whatever, and somebody inherited it as a keepsake, and then didn't mean much to them, and it was time to clean out a storage locker or something, and next thing you know, these things are at flea markets. I like to think if fishing reels could talk, the stories they would tell, whether it would be about the fish that were caught, the people that owned them. In one case, I recently caught one at the bottom of the sea, dragged one up. Maybe I would tell you how it got there and the fish story behind it. All right. Again, you can see we're just doing this on an iterative basis. I'm going to move over now to a cotton swab. That should clean up pretty much the rest of this. I get asked from time to time about ultrasonic cleaners, and yes, certainly you can use them. If you do use them, be careful of the additives that you may put in there. I just use soapy water, but there are ultrasonic cleaning fluids in that design, sometimes like automotive parts baths and the like, and sometimes they change the paint schemes on these, they remove decals on these, they do all kinds of things that I'm not interested in having done. So for the most part I stick with the manual, and yeah, I might miss a little gob of grease here or there, but I think for the most part I prefer to do it that way. This one's my real heck. I guess if I miss a piece, it's on me. But we're doing a pretty good job here. Guess I have to be cognizant of that, right? All right. I think we pretty much have got this case done now. One more little piece here. I want to make sure that the place where the axle's going through, I get that piece of grease out of there. All right. I think we'll all agree that's acceptable there. You want to get rid of the old grease because it harbors dirt and debris, and that dirt and debris can break free, jam a gear, do all kinds of things. All right, I'm going to be satisfied with that. Let's go back and show you how to put this in now. Remember what we said, you got an S shape. Of course, first thing I do is put it in backwards. Kind of happens that way, doesn't it? All right. That's the way you mount your anti-reverse for your dog. Your dog has the beak coming up. You're going to slide that behind, then work that over to the stud that it sits on. Now you've got it properly loaded. That is your anti-reverse dog and the S-spring, flat spring for that. A little bit of oil onto that. Just as I did that, I noticed there's a little piece. All right, we've had this guy sitting off on the side, just resting those needle bearings. We do want to re-grease. When we re-grease, we want to use fishing reel grease. I'm using Penn Precision reel grease for that. You want to inspect the teeth, make sure that they're all even and uniform. And your reinstall on these pieces essentially is the opposite of the way that you took them off. Teeth, face, and the spot behind the needle bearing. And again, be careful with that needle bearing. Maybe it's just me and experience where I've knocked one or two of them out and spent more time than I needed to getting them back in. All right, that's the way you install your main. I take our greased up pinion, reset that back in, and you can take a breath now. All right, remember what we said about the mounting plate. Go to your parts tray, get your mounting plate. Remember that the trip lever for this is at the 11 o'clock position, just about there. And I have a little screw starter that I'm going to use for this because I have little screws and they need to be started. How's that? This is a Klein tool. Dick out in Pennsylvania gave it to me, and I kind of mention him every now and then. I thank him for this. It's been a lifesaver for me. If you have big fingers and have trouble starting these screws, this is a great tool. I don't finish the screws with these. Just get them started and then I come back and do the last tightening with the screwdriver. This is a split blade. I don't want to ruin the blade. Okay, that's one. There's two. Tight. One more. Okay, now we can take our rotor that we cleaned up. The rotor goes on next. Then there's a keyway that goes on. Find the flat sides of your piece and make sure that it sits flush on this bowl. If it's not sitting flush, rotate the bowl until it does. And then we have the tie down nut for the rotor. Change the throw on your ratchet. Tighten that down. And then make sure that this all turns nice and easy before you go too much further. Okay, we're in good shape with that. Next piece we want to deal with then is the crossline block. We want to get our grease in the crossline block's face. That's the only place that's going to touch anything or move anything that needs to be lubricated. That goes over the stud on your main gear. A little bit of grease onto the axle shaft. Bring the axle shaft through. Note where those two holes are. Bring the axle shaft through the top, through the pinion gear. Find those two screws. Screw holes. There's one of them. There's the second. And then just work to align those so that they align with the holes in the block. And go back and get that U-clip. And make sure that it sits flush in here. Once you do that, we can reinstall the handle. Again, this one will tighten now, just the way that the reel is going to turn. A little bit of oil onto where the handle knob is on the side. This has an oil port. A little bit of oil into the port. All right, let's show you how this reel works. It goes up and down, right? Just like that. Nice smooth operator. I just noticing here on the bottom that I guess that cotton swab didn't get all that old stuff out despite thinking it did. I just wipe it off now. All right, there we go. Put the dog back on. We have a click. All right, I'm going to put the side plate on now. Goes on a lot easier than it came off. But, you know, that's the way it happens, right? All right. When I put the case screws back in, this has got 4. I like to alternate high, low, left, right. I want to keep equal pressure on the side cases. I don't want to kind of pin it somehow, bind it. And that happens sometimes. So kind of do an alternating pattern. The reel will like you for it. All right. 2, here's one on the bottom. one more up top, and then we'll go back and tighten them all, make sure that we got them all tightened down. So we talked, the one weakness of this reel is that it has the plastic trip lever in there. You can still find them, getting harder and harder to find. But that's in this higher series, the 4.8s and 4.9s. Have that trip lever. This is a big surf fishing reel. It's a nice one. Alright, I've been transferring a lot of grease from this glove over to the case. I want to make sure I wipe all of that down. I'll take the glove off now so we don't transfer anymore. Good news with that glove is it keeps it off your hands. And I never know what's in 20 or 30-year-old grease. So if I can keep it off my hand, I try to do that. Alright, one more thing here. This is your drag washer right here. It sits in this spool. Spool goes on. That's a rubber drag washer. It compresses to hold the spool. Ocean City used to make a reel like that, a couple of them. Alright, just need to tighten this down. Make sure it holds. And then back it off. Alright, well let's see how we did then. So what is it? This is the Mitchell 486. The 4 preface indicates that it's high speed. If you didn't know that, it says so on the handle. It has a big main gear on it, a beautiful brass gear and pinion gear. This is a large reel for saltwater fishing, big bail, and a unique trip feature. But look at that. Isn't that a nice performing reel? I think that's worthy of putting some line on, finding myself a 8 or a 10-foot surf pole, preferably a 10-foot surf pole, trying it out this striper season. It's a beauty. Okay, I want to thank our police, fire, safety, rescue, and everybody involved in public service and keeping us safe. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank our subscribers. You're truly what makes this channel work. And, well, this is an answer to a subscriber's question. How do you service the 496? Well, I didn't have the 496, but I had the 86, and there you have it. We have a service that's pretty close to what you're going to need to do, particularly on the lower end of your 496 reel. I hope everybody's enjoyed that. I wish everybody fantastic times and great fishing on the water, fast friendships, and, well, enjoyment as you service your fishing reels, keeping them ready to land the big one. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.